All right. Welcome to episode 8 of the Aspec podcast series. A little bit of feedback. I don't know where it's coming from. It's coming from video. Are you getting feedback on the stream?
Let me mute for a second. I can check.
Of course. All right, welcome to episode 8 of the Aspec podcast series. We are joined by Cosmic Quartz and Bumblin' Busby today. Going to be chatting about neurodivergence and Aspec identities and the intersectionality between the two. Myself, my name is Taiwai, a variety streamer here on Twitch, also a PhD student in my other side of my life. Study climate science, but I'm also interested in learning about the lived experiences of asexuality and aromanticism. And I run a discussion group here locally, which I've gotten to come to know quite a few people in the community, the Aspec community, and through that, it's inspired me to start a podcast where we can have these discussions more broadly here on Twitch, because I think this is something that has been missing from the Twitch community, and having a really kind of intersectional, in-depth perspective on asexuality and particularly aromanticism as well. So I would like to give my wonderful guests here a chance to introduce themselves. Let's start in alphabetical order with Bumblin' Busby. Do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. So obviously my name is Busby. I am a variety streamer. I do Overwatch, Animal Crossing, various cozy indie games. Sometimes I do a little bit of co-working and occasionally also art. And I am asexual, non-binary, and biromantic. Slash aromantic, I don't know. It's all confusing. And I do use they, them pronouns.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Busby. Quartzy, you want to say hello to the chat and introduce yourself?
Yes, I would love to. Hi, everyone. My name is Cosmic Quartz, aka Quartzy, and I am a demisexual, biromantic fae. But I also use she pronouns if fae is too tough. I'm really excited to talk about this. I primarily stream art on Twitch and games, a lot of indie games. I love Pokemon and D&D. And I also do some co-working and also occasionally tarot from time to time. But overall, my community and I love to talk about mental health, and we are huge, huge talking about neurodivergence and how it affects us. So I'm very excited to bring some of that lens to the discussion today. Thank you so much again for having me. And Daku, to all of the sweet star beans in chat that I see. I appreciate y'all for being here. Silver, Kuba, Rosie, hello.
Welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming on out today, and I'm so excited to be here chatting with both Busby and Quartzy
Yeah.
on a topic that I think is going to be really interesting to chat about. So
Absolutely.
I will also say that I'm, gray ace myself, non-binary, aerospec, and I also use they, them pronouns myself. So just a little bit of background as to the topic here. In the literature, there have been, it's somewhat contentious and controversial, but some aspects of the literature do show statistically significant correlations between asexuality, aromanticism, and in particular, autism spectrum disorder, i.e. that there's a higher prevalence of folks that identify as asexual and or aromantic amongst individuals with ASD. However, there's no causal linkages that have ever been found.
Mm-hmm.
But this is kind of one of the impetuses to look at a topic like this.
Right.
We also find that in media, many ACE, in lesser extent, ARO, because there are very few ARO individuals or ARO-coded individuals in media, often are also, unfortunately, coded as autistic. There's also, sadly, infantilization of both ACE and ARO individuals and of neurodivergent folks. Unfortunately, as well, as many of us know, disabled individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And in the media, disabled individuals are expected to have a non-existent relationship with sex. So there's all sorts of problematic assumptions there in the media. And we're going to have a more in-depth discussion of a lot of these, I guess, a lot of the issues around Aspec and whatnot, representation in the media on Wednesday, actually, in episode 9. But this is kind of a little bit of a background as to why I thought it would be interesting to talk about neurodivergence and Aspec identities today here on the podcast. So the first question that I have for everyone is, what lived experiences are you bringing with you today to the podcast around neurodivergence and Aspec identities? So when did you learn about your Aspec identities? When did you learn that you were neurodivergent? This might be an interesting thing to kind of start with. And why don't we start with Quartzy on this one?
Okay, sure. So I touched upon it a little briefly before, but essentially I am very late discovered with both my neurodivergence and my Aspec identities. I grew up in an environment where my needs weren't necessarily important, especially emotionally. And so it wasn't until I sought mental health treatment later on in my adult life that I actually even learned about, ADHD, potentially the autism, and then CTPSD, and the whole line of disabilities that come with those things. And I think throughout most of my early 20s and a lot of my relationships, I was very performative with my sexuality, and that I went through the motions and did what I thought I was supposed to do because that's what people in relationships do. And a lot of the times it led to heavy dissociation, which we can get into later on, like more specifics. But I haven't yet been in a relationship since discovering I'm demisexual. So I'm actually interested, I guess, to know how that would be. I don't know how it would be yet, so I'm excited to dive into that and talk more about that as someone who's like newly discovered, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Quartzy. I will give Busby a chance on this. What are the lived experiences you're bringing today to the podcast around neurodivergence and your Aspec identities, and when did you learn about them?
On a less serious note, specifically today, I am very, very, very tired because yesterday I went to a super big event, got massively overstimulated, and I'm kind of doing an emergency fill-in, so I probably am not going to be very good at acting like anything other than a zombie because I am so low on spoons. But specifically, when I learned that I am most likely neurodivergent, I think the most specific memory that I have is from Christmas time of 2021, where I was talking to my sister-in-law, that I think I specifically told her that I thought that I might be autistic, and she was like, well, you know, everyone's a little autistic, aren't they? Everyone's a little bit on the spectrum, aren't they? And so that was like the first time that I actually got that in person, so that's a memory that sticks in my head pretty well. And I've been trying to pursue assessment and diagnosis ever since then. So yeah, I'd say at least since December of 2021, but I know that I kind of had a pretty good inkling for a little bit before that as well. Specifically, I started coming across stuff from Instagram about like HSP or whatever, which is basically just like a way to make autism more palatable, and it
the
stands
highly
for
sensitive person.
Yep.
Yeah, I read that book. I read that book, and then I was like, this is just autism light.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was like,
It's literally just for people that like don't want to say that they are autistic because of stigma around autism and things like that. So they're like, I'm not autistic. I'm just a highly sensitive person. But I can't be too upset about that because that is what led me to actually discovering autism, and that it wasn't the way that I thought that it was either. And then figuring out, hey, this is actually most likely me.
yeah.
But I'm currently in the process of getting assessed for that, for ADHD, OCD, alexithymia, and a whole host of other things. And as for specifically when I discovered that I was asexual, I was probably about like 19 years old, being 28 now, so about 9 years ago or so. Thanks, Tumblr.
Tumblr.
But it was, I had been on Tumblr for a really long time, and I had kind of vaguely heard about asexuality here and there, and then I got into like my first serious-ish relationship or whatever, and that went like literally down the drain so fast because I was not performing in an acceptable way for my partner at the time. So then of course I'm like, okay, well, what's wrong with me, blah blah blah. And then Tumblr's like, oh hey, I have a suggestion. But yeah, that's pretty much how I figured out basically social media coming to the rescue.
Absolutely. Yeah, unfortunately, it's problematic to be in a relationship that society says has to be sexual, has to, be follow all the boxes that the metanormative and allonormative assumptions create. And if you don't meet all those boxes, unfortunately, it does make it really hard and can be, really, really tough. Obviously, I went through not quite the same experience, obviously, but I definitely tried to, have, these, I did try dating. I did try to, go, go through the motions of trying to be in a relationship, realizing it really wasn't for me, and then realizing, is there something wrong with me? And it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
until, I started having, more discussions with folks on the ACEs and STEM Discord, and later in the discussion group here locally, that I really started to realize, hey, I might very well be aromantic. And that's when I realized, hey, I don't need to be in a relationship because society tells me I have to be in the, the romantic, capital R, as I like to say, relationship. And coming to that realization has been such a big relief for me.
Mm-hmm.
Accepting the fact that I am very much aromantic has made my life so much easier in so many ways, I would say. Because I no longer have to pretend, though I have to, as I've said on previous podcasts, pretend that, oh yeah, I'm just, in school, to my grandparents, because they're constantly asking me, so when are you going to find yourself a
Yeah.
partner? And I'm just like, can we not, please?
I
I've ranted
always
about
get
that.
the questions too. The older you get, the more
Mm-hmm.
often they happen because they're like, when are you getting grandchildren? And it's like,
Yeah.
never. I was like, wait, you have a fur baby. You have Clancy, my cat. That's not enough for you? Look at that precious face. He'll never disappoint. He'll never fail a test.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure. And so on the
Mm-hmm.
neurodivergent front, I was actually diagnosed much earlier in life.
Mm.
I think I was diagnosed probably around, I would say probably be like 8 or 9, I would say, at least,
Wow.
or earlier, that I was ADHD. And interestingly enough, back in the mid 90s, autism and ADHD could not be comorbidities, i.e., if you were diagnosed with ADHD, you could not be technically on paper diagnosed with autism.
Wow, I
So
didn't
what
even
they
know that.
did is they diagnosed me with a non-specific verbal learning disability. So that's on paper what I have. It is very much, and I've had doctors tell me after that, very much, yes, autism. But on paper,
Wow.
non-specific verbal learning disability, because in the 1990s, you could not have both.
Wow.
Fortunately,
That's
that has
wild.
changed, and medical science has realized that they can coexist. But
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, when I was diagnosed, you could not have both.
Wow.
And because of the cost of actually, going through and getting, re-diagnosed as an adult
As an
is just so
adult.
expensive. I'm like, is there any point? What benefit is it going to provide me at this point? I've chosen not to, go through that process myself to get a
Mm-hmm.
proper, diagnosis of autism in my case,
Yeah, that's fair.
because it's just so expensive and so cost prohibitive, like it is for so many people.
100% my same situation. And not only that, but depending on like travel situations, you could actually have certain rights stripped of you when if you want to travel like overseas or
Yeah.
anything like that. If you have on paper, like they could take away passport, and
Yeah.
that isn't obviously ideal.
No.
And that could goes more into the infantilizing of disabled people,
Yeah.
but not to jump
Absolutely.
ahead, but it's just everywhere,
Absolutely. I absolutely love Coziest Fox's comment. 90s doctor, you're diagnosed with what we professionals call we don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Um,
also valid today, unfortunately.
yeah. Also 90s doctors, if you're AFAB, you're just hysterical and a little anxious. You're good.
Yep.
Oh. But yeah, I mean, luckily doctors, scientists, therapists, are learning every day. And with the new DSM-5, we've luckily unlocked like a lot of new information that can hopefully help normalize more umbrellas underneath the neurodivergence lens, you know, since there are so many facets and components to it. But it's really difficult for those of us who grew up, you know, before those tools were necessarily available. And even like being diagnosed early, like you said, it wasn't necessarily in your benefit because it wasn't even the proper diagnoses, and I can only imagine not the proper, you know, tools and coping mechanisms and everything, treatment rather, as well. So we're still working on that, finding that, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Peach Tastic mentioned that she tried to get diagnosed with ADHD and autism even as early, you know, even as recently as 21, and was told that they have symptoms of ADHD, but were refused an autism diagnosis.
Wow. Yeah. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I depending on the therapist too, like I've had therapists tell me, because I would consider myself decently well spoken. I was a reader as a kid, and then I became a lit major. So, you know, I've always had a pretty expansive vocabulary, but I think a lot when I was growing up, it was me just like regurgitating words I didn't fully understand even. And because of that, you know, people thought I couldn't be autistic because I was very well spoken, and I did well in school. So I had the, you know, study up kind of like autism profile type for a bit. But it allowed me to slip under the radar, so to speak, and certain sensory issues that I had became marked as like behavioral issues more so, because on the surface it appeared like my meltdowns were just like me lashing out and like being aggressive or violent or whatever, but like nobody was really asking the questions of like, where's the root cause of this, right? Like coming from, like, where's the overstimulation coming from? Yeah, love it.
Absolutely.
Fun
Very,
stuff.
very frustrating.
Yeah.
How still, even to this day, so many folks who are AFAB are misdiagnosed or refuse to be diagnosed because the unfortunate stereotypical patient is of autism is the AMAB who isn't able to show eye contact and is very robotic and rigid. One of the things I struggled with and still do growing up is the stereotypical, I can't, you know, I have to really work hard to give folks eye contact, and it's like rigidly practiced.
Same. And I feel like I look awkward doing it. Like I look like I'm staring with like bug eyes at people.
Yeah.
Like it looks forced. And I'm like, how do people do this naturally? 3 seconds and I'm uncomfy with it. Like
Quick, which eye do I look at? I don't know.
Oh, I look at the forehead in between both eyes. That's the trick. I don't look at either eye.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't. It's like so intimate. Like, oh, don't. Jump scare. That's what it feels like sometimes. Like I can't think when I'm being perceived like that.
I'm so sorry, Peach Tastic. It's absolutely awful what medicine seems to still want to do these days, where it's like, you know, you're the patient, you can't actually know anything.
Know your
I'm the
body
expert here.
and self. Yeah. You haven't lived with yourself for your entire life. No way.
Yeah.
Peach, send in spoons.
Totally. All sorts of spoons and bucks to everyone that needs them. So we've talked a little bit about, you know, what's our lived experiences that we're bringing today to the podcast around neurodivergence and Aspec Identities. And one of the things I want to, I'm interested in kind of asking is, in your own personal lived experience, do you feel that there is a connection between your neurodivergent identities and your Aspec identity? So, some things that we could think about here are, have you found that your attitude towards the connection between your neurodivergent identities and your Aspec identity changed over time, if you feel that this exists? And how do you feel about the way that society connects neurodiverse identities with, this is kind of coming back to the media approach, ace and arrow identities in the media, for example. And then obviously, because media is a reflection of society in society.
Yeah. I don't know who wants to go first, but if Busby doesn't want to go first, I could go first.
Sure,
I'm
sure.
formulating.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
go
if you're
ahead.
still processing, yeah. Because for me, yeah, definitely, I know that there's definitely a strong connection to my sexuality and my neurodivergence, and I didn't really start discovering more about myself and my sexuality until I learned I was neurodivergent. And not to get to too many details, but for I think a lot of neurodivergent people, being in intimate scenarios and settings, even if they aren't necessarily asexual, or if they're gray ace or demisexual, the environment of being in that situation can be very overstimulating on many sensory levels and can cause dissociation very quickly, right? So I think that it is possible, at least for me, to have an enjoyable experience, but it is very difficult because there are so many distractions and so many over sensory stimulating things happening all at once, and my neurodivergent brain needs time to process things. And at least in past relationships, I've never been able to just be like, okay, stop for a second, and I haven't necessarily had that strength of trust and communication to even understand it myself, let alone communicate that stuff to a partner, right? And I was learning more about my neurodivergence in my last relationship, and it became a little bit of a problem. So I think that, at least for me, I'm not necessarily against being in a relationship in the future. I just don't know how that would work. I probably would find myself gravitating towards someone who either understands, the demisexuality, the asexuality, or my neurodivergence. I would need somebody to understand either or both of those lenses now in order to feel safe in that environment, because trust is huge for me to even feel comfortable. And it's not even necessary either, but having the experience, having the sexual experience is not necessarily necessary for me. I don't know. Sorry. I'm it's tough. There's a lot of aspects to it. There really are. There's a lot of aspects to it. Can you repeat the second part of the question about the media again? Because I feel like I had a thought about that, but I wanted to refresh on the question.
For sure. So how do you feel about the way that society connects neurodiverse identities with ace and arrow identities in media?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I think it infantilizes us a lot. It will make jokes at our expense in a very literal sense. And it kind of treats us like we don't know what we're doing. And again, everybody's different, especially within the asexual umbrella. But having been someone who was raised heteronormative and had some heteronormative relationships, and was performative sexually in them, it's not like we don't know what we're doing, and I think media definitely treats us is very handholdy with us in the representation. I talk about it frequently whenever I'm talking about neurodiversity, but there is one show that I really appreciate. It's called Heartbreak High. And it has a character called Quinny who's autistic, and it's played by an autistic actress. And I just really love the storyline for that character because the representation that they have for her is so strong and spot on. She's AFAB, and they really show, especially in the second season of the show, they show like her both masked and unmasked around her friends and how it affects those around her, you know, when she masks versus not masking her needs and feelings and stuff. So I think that is one aspect of a really good representation that I don't usually see in media. So, you know, other showrunners take notes because they're doing it right there. And they took actual input from the actress herself to write Quinny's storyline, and they asked her about her actual lived experiences as an autistic person to help write Quinny's storyline, which I really, really love. And that's, I think, what more you know, executive producers need to be doing, is actually talking to people with these identities and listening to them.
Absolutely. It's definitely not done nearly enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's really problematic, because it seems to perpetuate really problematic stereotypes, both
Yes,
around
exactly.
neurodivergencies and around, you know, the very common problematic misconceptions about asexuality and aromanticism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we'll be definitely delving into this much more detail in episode
Next
9,
episode.
for
This is
sure.
just the teaser.
This is a little bit of a teaser getting you
Just a
ready
little
for
warm up.
exactly. Because there are so many problematic examples in media around asexuality and aromanticism and how folks that are aspec are portrayed, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any
Buzz,
thoughts?
have you
Yeah.
marinated?
Yeah. Specifically, I'm probably going backwards here. I definitely am. But I wanted to expand on the neurodiverse and aspec identities and media idea. The way you were putting it was really accurate. I think, Quartzy, where I feel like the media definitely treats people with those intersecting identities as kind of like these innocent little like uwu beans, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like specifically characters who are coded as neurodivergent are coded also as being like completely innocent towards sexuality whatsoever, where they're like, oh, sex, what's that? I don't know, I'm just I'm just a little innocent. And they're specifically coded was like these really like childlike tendencies and personality traits and things like that, where everybody else in the show is like quote unquote normal, professional, blah blah blah, and then you have this one like cute quirky character that always wears like pigtails and plays video games and things like that, things that are like typically considered quote unquote childish in typically accepted standards for society. Or like they'll collect like plushies, or like I want to go to the fair and things like that, and then they're also simultaneously like treated as completely naive and or uninterested in sex at the same time. So it's this unspoken connection between being like neurodivergent and aspec that's treated as like this very inherently like childish personality.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. and how the two are basically conflated in the media, as if you're ace and or aro, you're childish, and if you're neurodiverse, you're childish and are
Or boring too.
Exactly.
Like, not to be, like, but I feel like they always paint asexual and aromantic people as boring. Or that, I don't know, like, there's always this connotation, like, going along with, like, the societal expectation where if you're not getting married and having kids, then, like, you're not accomplishing, like, good things for yourself. Like, that is the standard to live up to. And like having platonic queer life partners and stuff, like that's never really like validated or considered as a viable option for people, like when it absolutely very well could be. And like soulmates don't necessarily have to be romantic by nature. Like personally, I think we have multiple soulmates in our lives, and some are in the form of best friends, some are in the form of mentors, some can be in the form of romantic partners if that's your vibe, but like it doesn't have to be. And who's to say we can't live and have like a life and a strong bond with any one of those types of soulmates? Like, why does it have to just be, the romance? And it's so frustrating because all of this is a possibility that is like never explored in media, right? And I think the closest I've personally ever seen is like Todd in BoJack Horseman, when like they talk about his asexuality. I love Todd so much. He's one of my favorite ace characters. And I do think they do a decent job of like going along with him exploring and figuring it out for himself and then setting his own boundaries and everything. But again, we need like more of that kind of representation where it's not like where they are, because like he is at some points a joke character, so even in that he's like, but they do a good job of trying to like, I think, separate. But yeah.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, so many other aspects, so many other examples of ace and or aro characters, it's very one-dimensional. It's the only aspect of
Right.
the character, and they don't allow for any exploration of the asexuality or aromanticism. They're aro ace, they're boring, they don't want to have friends with anybody, and they're very flat, one-dimensional. So I'm glad that BoJack Horseman with Todd Chavez actually allowed Todd to explore that asexuality and really highlight the fact that, hey, Todd creates a dating app for ace folks.
For aces, yeah, I love that.
And that was a real rejection of the stereotype that all ace folks are a romantic as well. So that was really great to see. Prior to that, almost every single one of the very limited, and let's say very limited examples of asexuality is one that is aro ace, has no desire to be friends with anyone, and is either married to their work, like
no, but they constantly have Todd going back with Emily, because you can tell he does have like a little bit of maybe that romantic or that like soft spot at least like towards her. So and I like how they explore like his relationship with, I can't remember her name, the axolotl, who he doesn't really vibe with, and he's like realizing, wait, like there are layers to this.
Definitely. It's definitely one of the more nuanced representations of asexuality that I've seen in mainstream media.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I haven't seen Heartstopper.
Nor have I, unfortunately.
But I've heard such great things, so I'm definitely going to add it to the list. And I'm so sorry. October 3rd sounds like a great day for something to drop, but The Legend of Vox Machina Season 3 is dropping that day, and that is what I will be doing on that specific day. But, on the 4th, when I'm done binge watching it, I'll be available.
So valid. I am going to be so tied up with Echoes of Wisdom as well around then, because that comes out at the end of September, and I am so excited for that game.
Oh heck yes. Well, thanks for squeezing us in before then.
Absolutely. it'll be a busy end of the September.
Yeah.
And then October, I've got 2 raid trains going on.
The Fruities,
The
right, is
Fruities
one.
and the Ace Week one as well.
Oh yeah, wait. Oh my God, wait. I also have 2 raid trains
Yeah.
going in October.
Yeah.
Wait. I was like, whew.
It's gonna be
Okay,
a very
yeah.
busy October, and then also I
Yes.
haven't officially announced it, but I will be raising. Well, actually, I did. I officially announced it on Twitter, but I will be raising money for the Trans Empowerment Project on October 5th as
Yes.
well. So
Oh my
yeah,
God,
October is
yes.
going to be very busy for me.
Hell yeah.
It'll be fun, but also extremely busy. So we may have a few less podcasts as a result in October.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. Sending you spoons.
Yeah, I'm excited. Very excited. It'll be my first ever kind of like official charity stream that I'll be doing.
Oh, that's incredible. That's so exciting.
So true, Venom. Yeah, I was, seeing that representation of asexuality and, coming to realize, hey, look, there are examples in media where aces date or come up with a dating app is like, holy shit. There's, actual proper ace representation that goes beyond what I'm going to talk about a lot next, the next episode, that it goes beyond the stereotypes that we've kind of mentioned here.
Mm.
And actually, I just realized I forgot. I'm so sorry. Is it? I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it? Is it Genstang? 6Genstang92? I'm so sorry if I butchered that. They mentioned that they're asexual autistic adult that wants to start doing drag eventually. That is so exciting.
Whoa,
That is
yeah.
amazing. And there's a drag event that I watched over COVID that was absolutely amazing. And it was called Science is a Drag. And
Ooh.
it kind of looked at trying to represent STEM as a drag.
I love that. What? That's
So
so cool.
somebody, and I think was my all-time favorite drag representation, basically took a Java code and represented it in terms of drag. So they represented Java in a drag skit, and it was absolutely amazing. I'm like, how do you take computer science and turn it into drag? But they did, and it was absolutely fantastic. So you can do some really cool stuff with drag. That's amazing.
That's so cool. Yeah, I love drag. I love going to drag shows. Oh my goodness. They're so fun. And I really
Absolutely.
like the nerdy side of drag that I'm starting to see pop
Absolutely.
up on TikTok. Like, first of
Sure.
all, I love watching like the Pokemon drag shows.
Hell
Or like I
yes.
saw someone
Hell
do like a
yes.
Baldur's Gate drag themed drag show, and I was like, yes, please give me everything. And I also just love watching drag queen streamers. My absolute fave, top tier content for me.
Absolutely. There's some really great
Yeah.
ones on Twitch for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Gaming drag shows are great as well. Yeah.
Mm.
I've watched a little bit of it. I haven't watched a ton of RuPaul's Drag Race myself, personally.
Mm-hmm. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's just a show.
Yeah.
I mean, like I like Queens from the show, and I like the platform it
For
gives.
sure.
But, it's definitely not all encompassing. There's so
Yeah.
much culture, yeah.
Definitely. So we've chatted a little bit about, lived experiences around neurodivergency and Aspec identities, and is there a connection? And I guess I'll take a second to talk about my own lived experience with this regard. And in my case, I do feel like, my aspects of, my autism and ADHD have certainly played into, me feeling uncomfortable in romantic or otherwise, settings.
Mhm.
So I think very much that, just not having to perform the societal requirements of a relationship, and taking it on my own terms as to what a
Mhm.
relationship looks like is just so much more comfortable for me. And I'm 99.9% sure, yes, in my case there's a link between those two things.
Mhm.
It's much easier just to say I care less about dating, that's not for me, I don't want a romantic relationship. And in my case, yeah, I think they're very much linked.
Mhm.
And I've come to meet so many folks who are also, in the ACEs communities, who also are neurodivergent and understand my experience. And I think that in itself makes it more comfortable to, hang out with those folks, because they can understand where I'm coming from in many. So just a little bit about kind of my own perspective on
Mhm.
that. And, this is something that I think all three of us can also comment on. We're getting into, aspects around gender identity now, because there's also, many, there are, a number of statistical correlations between, gender diverse individuals and neurodiverse individuals. In the literature, and from my own lived experiences, definitely. Can you comment on the intersectionalities between your gender identity and other aspects of your identity? So this could be your Aspec identities, your neurodivergence. Is there a link? What are the intersectionalities here?
Mhm.
So, one of the thoughts I have around this is that we want to, I want to highlight that my own perspective will very much be a white, uh, you know, European, settler kind of perspective
Mhm.
around, what does the Western settler gender role look like, and where do I fit within that? So this is kind of the caveat that I'm going to be speaking from a white settler perspective when I talk about this. But typically gender identities have had a strong linkage to one's role in a cis hetero, of course, romantic and sexual relationship. So what are the intersectionalities around this? Are you able to comment on that a little bit?
Yeah,
Does anybody
yeah.
want to start with that?
Busby, if you would like to start, you can start.
Yeah. I definitely say that my gender identity definitely has a very strong link to my neurodivergence and Aspec identities and like lived experiences. Like they're all very strongly interconnected for me. Like having not only issues like sensory issues, being neurodivergent, as well as like gender dysphoria issues and just a certain feeling about sex in general. Like typically I am someone who would be considered like not sex negative, because I don't like judge other people for being sexual or anything like that, but like sexual situations very much uh are are like a no-go for me. Like if I'm watching a TV show and like characters
Mhm.
are having sex on the screen or whatever, I will literally skip past it so fast
Yeah.
just because it's so uncomfortable for me.
Mhm.
Would you
And I
characterize
feel like
that as
that
sex repulsion then?
I was literally gonna ask that, but I didn't
thank
wanna
you.
say. I didn't wanna
It's so
speak.
funny because I've said that so many times, but my brain is so empty
Still,
right
like,
now that I
wrapping.
yep. But yeah,
I
so
didn't want to speak over you, but that was what I was thinking too. Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I am someone who would be considered a sex repulsed asexual, and I feel like that has a lot to do with just simply my asexuality in general. I am someone who does not experience sexual attraction whatsoever. So like sex to me is just this really
Sure.
awkward type of thing, and I feel like that definitely ties into my for brevity's sake, I'm just gonna go ahead and just say I'm autistic. I feel like that definitely ties into that because of the I get really severe really severe overwhelming feelings of like social awkwardness and stuff like that. So then
Mm-hmm.
seeing like a sexual situation or whatever is awkward enough, and then it's like amplified by the autism. So then I'm like just all types of like
You're like
uncomfortable
hyper
and
fixating on it.
uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
And in specifically my actual lived experience as a person outside of like media and stuff like that, sexual situations can be extremely complicated because like to me, like I do have like a sex drive or whatever, but it's not really a sex drive. It's just like, oh, I'm experiencing like a higher level of libido right now, and
Stress
you
relief, if
know,
anything.
yep, and it's like I
Yeah.
could take care of that by myself, but
Mm-hmm.
I am married. I do have a partner, so like that is an option as well. However, the other identities that I experience come into play at that point in time because of my autism. I am always so massively fatigued. Like, I've been in a state of autistic burnout for years now, and it's gotten to an all-time high within the past few months. So it's like, do I really have the energy right now
Mm-hmm.
to go have sex with another person? Not to
Mm-hmm.
get too TMI, but that's basically what
No,
it boils down to.
I resonate, and I'll say more when I talk, but no, I totally know what you mean.
And then
Mm-hmm.
because I'm so tired and I'm like not really super into it, then I get so overwhelmed by all these other thoughts like, is this
Dissociating.
okay? Is that okay? Like, am I performing this right? And stuff like that. And then that also ties into my gender identity as well. As a femme perceived person, we are automatically extraordinarily sexualized. So, being sexualized for my femme perceived traits causes me an extreme level of gender dysphoria
Mm-hmm.
because people are going, "Oh, you have boobs. Oh my god, boobs are so sexy." And I'm like, "No, they aren't. Stop. Fuck off." And
You're like, compliment my brain, the real
yeah, or
sexy
like
part of
my
me.
eyes, or like I know my eyelashes aren't that long, but maybe my eyelashes, like something
Mm-hmm.
other than sexualizing me. Like,
Yeah.
I cannot describe the level of discomfort that I experience when someone sexualizes me. Um like obviously I have a sexual partner, and he'll, compliment me, and to him, like, sexual compliments are compliments because he's a sexual person. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
and like I have to play this line between like, okay, can I take this that he's just complimenting me and translate it in my head to like, okay, he's just saying that I'm like a beautiful person or something like that, and just accept it that way. And then that also has another level to it with my burnout and stuff, because trying to translate like neurotypical or not neurotypical, but allistic, because he's ADHD, so he's not neurotypical, but trying to translate like allistic language and speech and things like that into a way for my autistic brain to actually like handle correctly without getting overwhelmed or things like that is, and it's just, I could literally go on forever on a rant about all the different ways that everything intersects, because whenever I'm experiencing like gender dysphoria, it also causes me to have extreme sensory overload, because then all the parts of my body that are causing me dysphoria are suddenly sensory
Hyper aware.
overwhelming, where like I have wide hips. So then I'm like, literally, can I please just like chop my hips off right now? Can I just shave them off and get rid of them? Oh my god, I hate how my clothes are fitting on my hips right now. It's so overstimulating, it's too tight, or like specifically like having to wear bras or whatever is like, oh my god, I wish I could just chop my freaking boobs off right now and stuff like that. Like
The I don't know what the actual word for it, but the body part like mutilation, like fantasy, trigger warning, sorry to say that, but like that is so real. I've had those experiences when I'm dissociating in those situations as well. And it's so uncomfortable, especially if you can't really communicate that and you have to just quote unquote like get through the moment, right? It creates like a further trauma, I think, in regards to those situations if you're not able to properly express your needs in that moment, which sucks.
man,
That's really
and I'm
tough.
just like, oh my god, I want to I want to rip my clothes off.
Yeah,
I
and
want to rip
burn
my
myself
skin
alive.
off.
Yeah.
I want to just stop
At the
existing
stake.
because everything is
Mhm.
so overstimulating right now.
Yeah.
And things like gender dysphoria can really contribute to that heavily.
Yeah. It's so true. Resonating so much.
Absolutely, and I've definitely come to meet quite a number of, you know, ACE folks who very much feel similarly to how you feel, Busby. Oh, did stream die? Is stream still going?
For me, I'm in an ad, so
Okay.
I think it's okay.
It looks like it's still going to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
It
Mhm.
buffered for a second, so I wanted to make sure.
Mm.
Yeah, I do notice occasionally, I think it's on Busby's end, that there's a little tiny bit of an echo, perhaps.
Mm.
I don't know if it's from the
I have stream muted. Maybe my microphone is just
I don't know if it's VDO Ninja that's causing it. Let me see.
I don't think so. It's muted.
yeah, I'm muted on my end, and
Yeah.
that's all muted, so
Who knows? Does weird things sometimes.
Discord does too, honestly.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
to be honest.
Definitely. Yeah, you're not the first person to mention that. I've talked to so many folks in the Aspec community, particularly who are gender diverse, that have had expressed very similar sentiments about body dysmorphia and so many other things like that. I think there's definitely a real intersectionality when it comes to that, and unfortunately, in our white settler kind of culture, where AFAB folks are hypersexualized, unfortunately, it is really problematic. And then in my case, as an AMAPed individual, I'm supposed to be really thirsty for sex, and if I'm not, then I'm broken. So there's really problematic
Stigmas that exist.
Stigmas
Yeah.
that exist.
100%.
Any further thoughts around that, Quartzy?
Yeah, totally. I would definitely agree that my gender identity is strongly linked to my neurodivergence. I think for those of you who may have just been coming in or weren't here when we were originally saying it, I go by Faye pronouns as well as she, but that's honestly mostly just for society normalization's sake at this point. If I could choose to, I would only go by Faye pronouns, but it's like one of those neo pronouns that are still tricky for people, so I totally get it. Essentially though, Faye is a gender neutral pronoun. It really stems strongly from my neurodivergence and that I don't feel part of this world sometimes. Like I feel like an alien, as much as that feels weird. I never fit with like societal norms. I never understood like, social cues, especially when it comes to like romantic and relationship type things. The types of things people in normal relationships would like want and aspire for were not usually things that I would necessarily want and aspire for. And that I learned, unfortunately, like the hard way throughout like many relationships where, I had certain expectations of me, that, again, like Busby was saying, like in a gender role, like you have those expectations like assigned AFABs. It's just really difficult. And, growing up, not really like having my needs met from, parental figures. I didn't even consider that there was an option to have needs met, in any other relationship. And, I know you plan to do an episode talking more about like asexuality and CPTSD. And I think that that's an amazing other lens to talk about because I think I also have some links there as well. But in terms of my gender and neurodiversity and asexuality, I definitely think that the gender expectations of a woman, female, whatever, like it's always put a lot of pressure on me in relationships in the past especially when I was in like heteronormative relationships. To where I felt like I had to, in order to be perceived as like a good partner, like I felt like I had to, provide this level of, I hate to say the word like service, but like it felt like a service, like, and I've been in multiple relationships and like even my last relationship, especially where like, I don't even think the person knew how dissociated I was throughout those like, because I am high masking, right? So like I'm very good at going through the motions and like it's like a high trauma response to like not let the other person know that something's wrong, right? But it's tough. It's tough because it's so not normalized that even in our most intimate relationships, like when we do choose to have them, it can be difficult to advocate for ourselves, even with those closest to us. And I think that's like the biggest connecting point that like ties everything together for me is like the advocating for myself. And the more I spend time with other people on the Aspec identity spectrum or the neurodiversity spectrum, I'm finding like more acceptance and more validation with my needs. And like it makes me think that maybe there is like a potential out there, like a potential person that would fit my needs. I wouldn't consider myself sex repulsed. Like I have had some very negative situations that, have given me repulsion in those certain situations, but I also have had, a couple, very few isolated positive experiences. And like, I think it could, like, I know myself so much better now than I ever have. And I know my needs and my like accommodations and stuff. And I think if it's not necessary for a relationship for me, but if I was with somebody that was interested or curious to like give it a shot, I'd be willing to give it a shot. But overall, like I'm more interested in having someone to vibe with, and maybe like I would consider myself like romantic. But I also would say that in the past I've let that control like too much of my it's like that all or nothing thinking that comes with the neurodivergence too, where I have trouble finding balance in my relationships. So I think if I do enter a relationship moving forward, my biggest priority will be to like not lose myself, because it took me so long to find myself. And I think that is my fear, and why I haven't entered a relationship since discovering like, my demisexuality, is because like I'm just scared that it's not going to be respected because of the gender roles and everything that often come with relationships. But yes. Sorry for the ramble.
Never apologize. All of this is so important to talk about, and it's so valid. It's
Taco.
important to talk about these experiences because you're not the only one, I bet, that has experienced, fortunately, that, and unfortunately, and we've talked about it before, but demisexuality is so heavily invalidated. So,
Yeah.
is
I
the issue.
invalidate myself with it too, because I do like Buzz. I do have an experience a sex drive. Oftentimes, it is usually a lot easier for me to just take care of it myself, because there's no worry about communicating, like, because like it's not sexy to be like, wait, stop, I need a minute, like, or I'm overstimulated, or that thing that you're doing isn't actually enjoyable. And like I feel like in the past, when I would try to like communicate those things, it would just like halt the process and kind of like make things like maybe awkward, so I would just shut up and be like, well, it doesn't matter. So I think that it is important to have those conversations, because like everybody's needs does matter, and like our needs do matter. And I believe that we should be able to find people who can respect that, but I know that it's difficult, and we're here to share the, I guess, I don't know, midsummer cry session of it all, of like the struggles. Like we can cathartically let it out together, but also hope and strive for better by normalizing these conversations.
Definitely, and that's why I wanted, have this podcast and have these really
Yeah.
important conversations, because
Mhm.
these experiences are valid, and they're all fall under the scenario experience, and
Mhm.
unfortunately society doesn't understand that the experiences exist and are valid parts of the ascenario experience.
Mm.
It's important to have these conversations so that we can find one another and find communities where we can have safe conversations around this.
Also, Effector, it's great to see you. And
Absolutely.
I just want to comment, like, I don't think I've never not dissociated. Wow. And that's how I know there's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I also know that, like, for me personally, dissociation and escapism and maladaptive daydreaming has been my like top coping mechanism since childhood, because it was like my only escape, like from difficult traumatic situations. So that is like my personal Achilles heel, is like actively trying to like bring my mind back into my body, and like try and be present again, because like I spent my whole life trying to like escape. So that's a really, really difficult one that I am like constantly trying to like overcome.
Absolutely.
I believe it's possible. It has to be.
I did have something to add, actually, if that's okay.
Mm.
Of course.
Quick trigger warning, for traumatic sexual experiences and stuff like that. God, I literally can't go a single podcast without bringing those up. But I feel like in terms of gender identities and how they play into roles in cis hetero romantic and or sexual relationships, or at least ones that appear to be cis het. I feel like, speaking from the lens of a person who is femme perceived in a relationship with a cis male, I feel like a lot of the times at least from, as you were saying, like the white Western lens and everything like that, there is a severe expectation that like sexual acts are only for like the pleasure of the male in the relationship, and that like the experience of like the femme or femme perceived person is not as important. So it does tend to get normalized in that, well, like sex doesn't have to be like a pleasureful experience for the femme or femme perceived person. In fact, if it is uncomfortable or even like physically painful, because people who are AFAB do have a, you know, pretty high tendency of having like, you know, actual physical dysfunction issues like pelvic pain and things like that. That doesn't matter. It's fine because, you know, it's the job of the femme or femme perceived person to, you know, get through that discomfort and that pain for the sake of the male in the partnership.
Yeah. Dissociation is a superpower. No, Effector! I'm not here right now.
So unfortunate that, as you know, Busby mentioned, that sex has to be in, you know, in the dominant cis hetero Western settler perspective, sex is there for the what is perceived to be the male's pleasure, and that's all it is. It's disgusting and really, really unfortunate that that continues to be the narrative pushed in society and media, and unfortunately it's led to so many problematic assumptions and, you know, situations that perceived people have to be put in.
I think interestingly enough too, you know, since I wasn't always self-identifying or discovered as neurodivergent, I think because people knew me as a sexual person before they knew me as an autistic or as a demisexual person, it became very difficult for people to wrap their brain around the idea that it, like, one could, like, for example, oh, I've been in sexual relationships, I can't be autistic, because they infantilize autism. And then also, oh, I've been in sexual relationships, I can't now be demisexual, because they don't realize that sexuality is fluid, and that, you know, especially being an autistic person, I was very high masking through every single relationship I've ever been in, because I didn't even know I was autistic for most of my relationships. It was only like the last two that I really knew. And one, I was discovering it, and that's kind of what caused it to fall apart. But they didn't believe me that I was neurodivergent, so that became difficult. But yeah, it's there's a lot of overlap.
I am trying to sort out and figure out where that echo is coming from, and I basically have my mic turned up full. I've moved it a little closer, so hopefully that will fix things. I don't know what else I can do with my mic except at some point get a better mic, maybe.
I just like lowered my headset volume just in case it's repeating, but
yeah, so hopefully moving the mic closer is a little better.
okay. Dagucha.
Thank you for letting me know, for sure. It's sometimes hard to tell. Yes,
It's
gain
so
filters.
hard.
Yeah. I will look into maybe some gain filters on my mic.
Also, just going back to North of Sleepy's comment, when they're saying, I don't think people realize, or I think people don't realize that communication can be, you know, attractive. The idea that asking for different things is unsexy and kills the mood is wildly unsupportive to everyone's needs because that's the only way we learn what we like and what we want. Yes, that I totally agree. And it I don't know what it's like to have a partner that's like understanding of that, but I'm sure they're out there. I'm sure they exist.
I talk about it almost every episode, but everybody
Mm-hmm.
in this chat right now at some point needs to look into Andie Nordgren's A Short Manifesto for Relationship Anarchy, because it really highlights that communication, no matter what kind of the relationship, is key and is central to platonic relationships, to queer platonic relationships, to monogamous, romantic relationships. No matter what it is, communication is key. It's important. As North of Sleepy says, it can be sexy. It's just something we need to do more.
Yeah.
And so the name of that is A Short Manifesto for Relationship Anarchy. I'll link it here in the chat. There we go. I've looked it up so many times it knows to bring me to this page, so that's a win.
I was gonna say if you could type it, heck yeah. Oh, perfect. Got the link and all.
So it was a blog originally in Swedish. It's since been translated. And it has 9 central tenets around, relationship anarchy, which comes from a poly model, but there's so many things that anybody can take from this. So I think, there's so many things that lend itself well to all sorts of relationships, and particularly there's lots of things that we can take from this for ACE that, are really lend itself well to the ACE and Arrow experience.
Thank you so much for that resource. That's an
Absolutely.
awesome tool.
Definitely. So thinking about, this question from my own experience, I would say that much like most of my, life, I was kind of performing whatever I thought society, wanted me to be doing in terms of eye contact, in terms of, what am I supposed to be doing, to fit in with society. I think, I came to realize, a little bit later in life, in my case, I was really just performing what society told I was supposed to be growing up. I was performing the male, I guess, role. And then I realized, wait a minute, that's not really me. I'm not male. And it wasn't until I became comfortable understanding my Ace and Arrow identity that I really questioned that. And then when I started questioning, hey, wait a minute, I don't have to exist in a cis hetero world. Why the fuck do I have to perform what society tells me to be? Because that is not what I am. I don't feel masculine. I don't feel male. I was just performing it because that's what I was told I was. So I think, this is really very much interconnected. All 3 of them are very much interconnected for me. Coziest Fox, definitely, I totally can agree, totally relatable. I think this is maybe a good place, since we've been going for close to an hour and a half now, maybe to take a, 5 or...
Body break?
Yeah, 5-10 minute break. Go on a be right back screen before we come back and continue our discussion. Does that work with everyone?
Oh, that'd be lovely. I wasn't going to ask for it, but I'll definitely take it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, go Piscowirlies. I'll do it.
All right, so we're gonna
Dr.
go
Food.
and be right back. We'll be back in 5 to 10. See you back in a little bit.
Sounds
Bye.
good.
And welcome back. Thank you for hanging around through the break. It was definitely well needed. Go back and deal
Welcome
with
back.
some laundry and all that fun stuff. We got
Duty
a
calls.
really juicy, exciting question to talk about here. It's like the final exam essay question that y'all have been waiting for. Think back to, like, every single university exam you may or may not have written. This is that question right there at the end waiting for you. Y'all ready? So neurodivergencies, romantic and sexual relationships, and gender roles make up a lot of the societal expectations that are placed on all of us. So neurodivergency, romantic sexual relationships, and gender roles make up a lot of the societal expectations placed upon us. Many people appreciate the structure they give or just find them easier to exist within. So, society's framework may be easier to exist within for some people, while others, such as myself, find their fulfillment by breaking those stereotypical boxed roles and discovering alternative options. How do you feel about the societal expectations that have been placed on your life? Is there a general philosophy that you live by when it comes to societal pressure? Answer in 5,000 words or less.
Yeah. In a sense that adds a million fluff words to create 500 words worth. Now, I could take it if others need time to marinate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. So as an Italian AFAB, my family is very big on, like, oh, you have to have grandkids, right? Like, you have to continue on the legacy and the bloodline. And I'm like, no, the bloodline ends with me. Okay, this is for the best. I swear. But no, like, so one of the biggest expectations that I've had as a AFAB, I jokingly say Italian. It's just, my mom is very pushy with that. But yeah, is, when are you having kids? Are you having kids? Why aren't you having kids? And I think there's just a lot of expectation on, like, what even our, at least like my parents thought that their lives would look like at this point in their life. Like, they thought they would be grandparents by now. And so I don't think, like, I think I'm fortunate in that they would never, like, actively, like, talk down on me about it. But I could tell there is that expectation, and it's like a silent disappointment, right? And it feels like a silent disappointing thing that I haven't fulfilled. I won't be able to fulfill. I don't necessarily want to fulfill. I think kids are great, right? Like, and I love the fact that I can give them back when I'm overstimulated, right? Like, my biggest fear, and I think something that both my parents as undiagnosed autistics, like, dealt with growing up, was being overstimulated and being parents and not having the tools to deal with that, and then, like, it affecting me negatively as the child. And, like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to traumatize, like, another, human being. And I also just can't afford to. There's so many reasons, right? So I think that's a huge expectation that is placed on me that, like, I don't think I'll ever be able to fulfill. And, like, it also scares me, like, when I think about the idea of a potential, like, future partner. If you say you don't want kids, that is, like, a very like, that's a very stark, like, difference for some people. Like, it's one of those dividing topics, rather. So, I guess it's felt very freeing to acknowledge the fact that, like, I'm okay with being the fun aunt or aunt, like, and even, just, I don't know, being a big sister to, like, other people, growing up in ways that I can. I think I've released a lot of like self expectations that I've placed, and shame that I've also placed on myself, like, oh, like, am I not capable of being a mother, or like, am I a failure for not? And again, like when you were talking under your lens, Tai, about like, am I broken for not wanting and not feeling like, the stereotypical like male persona? Like, am I broken for not, like, fulfilling literally my only duty? And this is like a little bit of a physical health issue too at this point, because some background is like, I recently, a couple months ago, got diagnosed with endometriosis, and I have a consultation literally this Friday with a surgeon to discuss like either a hysterectomy or another surgery. So like that's a huge decision now that I'm going to be faced with. And I think ultimately, like, I'm gonna choose what makes me happiest, but there is still that fear, right, around like when I do make that decision, it will become very final. And, you know, how is that gonna affect me in terms of like my relationship with people who do have maybe some unspoken expectations around that with me? Um, but at this point in my life, I've lived like 28 years people pleasing and, putting on the act and masking and living my life as to what I thought I was supposed to be. And I was not happy. I was miserable. I was so depressed. Like, um, and, not to like touch too deeply on it, but it is, Suicide Prevention Month, and, neurodivergent people are like a lot more likely to be chronically depressed and struggle with those sorts of thoughts. So I think that living as your most authentic self is like the best way to heal our inner child and give ourselves like the accommodations that we never maybe had growing up. Um, and so even though it might be hard, I don't think I will enter a relationship unless it fits exactly the, needs that I have moving forward. Like I won't, go through the motions for anything less at this point than what I know like resonates with me 100%, because it's just, I'm tired. I'm too tired. Like you were saying earlier, Busby, about like spoons and stuff. It is a lot of spoons to keep up with relationships and stuff, unfortunately. Um, and yeah, it's just, it can be really, really difficult.
So valid, really well spoken, really eloquent. And yeah, live the life that you want to live. You shouldn't be bound by what society says you should be. I think, many of us in the 2S LGBTI plus community as a whole, and then, obviously, with many aspects of our Aspec identities are already, saying, no, fuck society, like, that's wrong. Let's,
Literally.
so why try to exist in a framework that doesn't meet your needs?
Especially because like the society that we've been like it's not doing us any favors. So, and I think that might be the difference between like other generations, is like we are like starting to fight back against that expectation. And like that can be upsetting for people who weren't able to or didn't do that in their lifetime. So it can cause like a lot of tension, I feel like. Mhm. But yeah, I think that's
Oh, I'm
probably.
muted.
I was
I was
about to
gonna
say.
say. I was like,
I was saying that, yeah, it took me a long time to become comfortable rejecting the framework that society put me in, especially because as a neurodivergent individual, it was literally me just trying to find a way to fit in. And by finding a
yeah.
way to fit in, I felt like I had to exist within the framework that society set for me. Because it was literally, I just want to make a friend in high school and not be bullied every single day.
Yeah.
So when I finally, got a little older and stopped having to fit in the, the narrative that society theoretically wrote for me, I guess, I was like, this is more authentically me. And I've been so
Hmm.
much happier coming to that
Yeah.
realization, rejecting compulsory sexuality, rejecting, and I want to say rejecting compulsory um, romance as well. It's not just sexuality, it's also you have to be in a
Hmm.
romantic relationship, or what the fuck are you doing with your life?
Hmm.
And then, as I kind of alluded to before, I'm like, well, if I'm already saying fuck compulsory sexuality, fuck romance, why the hell do I need to pretend to exist in a binary framework that does not explain my identity?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, like Black Sugar Pill said, so proud of you because that's
thank you.
very difficult.
Yeah.
That's so hard to like people like it's I just want like if you're watching and you're like, wow, like that's a lot like it I want you to know it takes so much time and like self-reflection to even like learn this, right? Like for me, like I've been discovering this for the past like 3 years and like it can be fluid. Like if you're someone who hasn't really given it much thought or you're still like
Mm,
potentially learning things about yourself, like it's okay if you don't have like a label for it at the moment because there is such an umbrella
yeah,
within the Arrow Ace and Ace, you know, like
absolutely.
there's a lot of nuance and even among us we're only 3 people, right? So there
Mm-hmm.
are so many other perspectives and that is why you keep watching different episodes of this awesome podcast so you can hear all these different, you know, lenses that various aspec people operate under and the different ways that, you know, we all make our relationships or lack of, you know, work for us. And again, the queer platonic life partner, that is such a valid option. Like I think soulmates come in all forms and again, it's also a valid option to not have that and to just pour all of the love into yourself and have friendships that are just as strong, you know, like there shouldn't be such a weight on romantic relationships. Like, you know, I think friendships can be just as important and it just really sucks that society doesn't always recognize that.
Absolutely. There's such a hierarchy placed on romantic relationships. You know, friendships are only there to get you to the romantic relationship. And once you're in a romantic relationship, you've hit the pinnacle society and, you no longer need friendships, apparently. And that is so wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I totally, totally understand where you're coming from, Venom XD. Um, they experienced, over 20 years of people telling them how, they're supposed to be, and I completely feel that just let me be, just
Mm-hmm.
fuck off. We don't need to fit in the role that society tells us to be in. Just let us be. You know,
Yeah.
why should we have to exist, or why should we be required to participate in compulsory sexuality, in compulsory romance, in a gender binary society that doesn't work for many, many people?
Yeah. Like it doesn't work for more people than it works for, I feel like at this
Oh,
point.
there's
Like
so many people that just, try to exist within because it's easier than trying to reject it. And unfortunately,
mm-hmm.
that's not good either.
And that leads to a lot of depression,
It
right?
does.
Like and loss of I don't want to say loss of innocence because like I have this running bit with friends where it's just like everything leads back to innocence lost.
Hmm.
It's about innocence lost and it is about innocence lost. Um yeah, innocence lost. I don't know how it always comes back to that.
To be forced into a box that we don't fit in, like, that is absolutely debilitating. And that's what society is, trying to fit people into a square box, and that doesn't work.
And it's not even enough to do that. Like, you get actively shunned and shamed and like put down and told you're not good enough and like forced to internalize like a lot of negative emotions that aren't even yours and ours to deal with. Like, don't give me that. That's not mine. Take that back, right? Like,
Exactly.
I did not ask for that. I'm just trying to grill, Your Honor. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And Java mentioned platonic relationships are so important. And unfortunately, I've had, many friendships over the years kind of disappear as folks, have gotten into romantic relationships, and then all the platonic relationships they had kind of fall by the wayside. People put so much more emphasis on the one life partner and don't really understand that platonic relationships can exist beside romantic relationships. And this is really why I think everybody needs to read, and I'm going to keep coming back to this, the short
Plug it
Instructional
again.
Manifesto for Relationship Anarchy, because every relationship is unique, and no one relationship should be put on a pedestal above another relationship. They should be understood to be unique and respected for what they bring to your life. No one relationship can do it all for you.
That's the other thing too. I think there's such an unhealthy expectation, at least like going back to traditional relationship stereotypes and archetypes of like your partner does have to fulfill and check off like every single box. And like, I don't know, for me, and like I'm someone who has even like I've experienced polyamory before, and like I believe that very strongly it's important to connect with different individuals because we do get different things and different people bring out different parts of ourselves and our inner child and different hobbies, and it's very unrealistic to expect one person, and also unhealthy to expect one person to fit all of that, right? Like, we need nuance, we need different perspectives, right, in order to be well-rounded, and not live in like an echo chamber, I feel like, at least to grow, but I guess not everyone's looking for that. I would always like to be approving. I think maybe you guys can resonate, maybe all can resonate, sorry. As neurodivergent people, like I feel like, especially late discovered, I'm always like self criticize, I don't want to say criticizing, but I'm always like examining my actions. And I think it's because I've recognized throughout my life that they are different from other people's actions. So I'm always like hypercritical of my actions. And it's caused so much like over analyzing over the years.
Introspection to the umpteenth degree.
Yeah. And it's like I gaslight myself sometimes too. And I'm like, wait, am I really experiencing this, or am I just overthinking it? Yeah.
I see you popping in there, Princess Ali. Welcome on in. And I really, really like this quote by Andie Nordgren. Yes, there's very much a polyam lens here, but I think this can be read in a much more general sense as well. Don't rank and compare relationships. Cherish the individual and the relationship and your connection to them. One person in your life does not need to be named primary for the relationship to be real. And I read this as no one particular relationship needs to fulfill every single one of your needs. Every relationship is independent, and a relationship is, can fulfill unique, different needs.
As a quick interjection before I forget the thought, because brain quitting right now, like specifically on this exact topic of like friends versus romance and stuff like that, like
Yeah.
I know that in my personal lived experience with a lot of my friendships, I was the person that was trying to like put them into a romantic box and to pursue like the romantic avenue with it because of Western society's like obsession with like romantic relationships have to be the most important. They have to come above everything else. So if I had a friend that I really, really, really liked and cared about and wanted to keep in my life, I would always be like, I have to make this a romantic relationship if I want to keep this person in my life. Otherwise, someone else will come along and start dating them, and then they'll forget that I exist.
Ooh, that is such a mood.
So valid and unfortunate, but it is true. There's such a heavy push and such a, you know, everybody in, you know, the Western settler culture is that, you know, in order to find your most ultimate self, you have to be in a romantic relationship. And so everybody's forced to, you know, find that one life partner. And you're expected to have them meet every single one of your needs as a result. And so I think, you know, there's pressure to, as you said, figure out who that is, and or, you know, somebody else might come and steal them away from you. It's a really unfortunate take on relationships. So I'm telling you, again, go read Andie Nordgren's A Short Instructional Manifesto for Relationship Anarchy.
Hell yeah. Third time's the charm.
So we've had such a wonderful conversation. We've gone into so many important issues around, you know, neurodivergency and the intersectionalities with, you know, Aspec identities, gender identity, and the number one pet peeve of mine, metanormativity. That is another buzzword that everybody should think about. A metanormativity is the assumption that everyone needs to be in a coupled, monogamous, romantic relationship. Fuck that.
Yes. Hell yeah.
I've had such a wonderful, fantastic, fun time hanging out with both of you, Quartzy and Busby.
Oh, yeah, same.
Any final thoughts here? I'm going to snooze that ad before we wrap things up. Any last things you wanted to talk about that are burning that we haven't had a chance to talk about?
I guess just be open to like exploring and things being fluid if you are resonating with anything we've been talking about, because things can change as you learn more about yourself as a neurodivergent or as an arrow ace person. You know, things can change depending on the people you surround yourself with as well, and whether or not your needs are being accommodated. You could be open to certain things, or you could discover, you know, certain parts about yourself, you know. So I would just say it's important to surround yourself with people who are willing to accept you where you're at your most authentic. And, you know, it's important to advocate for yourself as well, against those pressures and those societal norms, because you don't owe anyone anything except yourself, your happiness, I think. Yeah. Yeah, and thank you for having us. I really had fun talking about this. I think that it's so important, and please check out other episodes of this podcast because there are so many other amazing lenses and umbrellas to talk about this under. This was just one. I know there's a
Absolutely.
ton of neurodiverse people in chat, but there's plenty of other lenses if, this didn't 100% resonate. So yeah, thank you
Absolutely.
for doing this podcast because it's so important.
And I've had so much fun. That is the
Yeah.
YouTube channel where all these VODs go up after we, live stream them here on Twitch. They go up to YouTube.
Hey.
And then once a week on Mondays, they get pushed to Spotify and Apple Podcast as well. If you just want to
Ooh,
listen to them. If
fancy.
you just want to listen to the audio portion, you can listen to them on Spotify and Apple Podcast as well. Thank you so much to everyone, to all the thoughts and wonderful discussions we've had. We are going to go on a raid here, see who's live and see where we can, who we can bring these wonderful conversations to as we exit out for the day. Take a look.
Yeah.
I did have a quick point to bring up, if that's
Absolutely,
okay.
of course.
Since we are talking about like Aspec experiences and neurodivergency and stuff like that, am I gonna get smacked by Automod if I post some links in the chat?
You might. It may reject your post. I believe that Automod might get angry. Send them to me and
I'll send it
post
to
them.
you. Yeah. So specifically, and I talked about this before, but I want to talk about it again since this is specifically on the topic of neurodivergency and Aspec identities and stuff like that, is an identity that I learned about recently is actually Adfectual, which is an attractional orientation where attraction present depends on one's state of mind. It also describes one whose sex repulsion or romance repulsion fluctuates, and it is specifically an identity that can be applied to people who are neurodivergent, especially like with fluctuating moods like personality disorders, PTSD, mood disorders, and things like that, or like trauma survivors.
Okay, way to teach me something in the 9th inning. Okay.
Heck yes.
I'm like, all right, copy pasta into my notes app.
But it is specifically something for people who are neurodivergent, so I thought that it was important to bring up considering the topics we've been talking about.
Yeah, Daku so much, Busby. That's important.
My apologies. I cut you off there. I'm so sorry, Busby.
Oh no, that's okay.